fuel choice that even rivals can agree on? Now that's worth the hype. Cheaper, cleaner, and homegrown. Pump it up with unleaded 88.
We recommend listening to the CW Pod with a glass of Steeple Ridge Bourbon. Grown, distilled, well-rested, and bottled in Erling, Iowa. Now from the Channel Seed Studios, this is the CW Pod, fueled by Steeple Ridge.
Hello, it's Cyhawk Week. We have this cool little miniature Cyhawk trophy in studio. Actually, it's ours to keep now, thanks to my buddy Mike Martz, who does merch for us at Cyclone Fanatic. This was I don't know, like what they were looking to sell these things, and they sent him a sample, and they didn't end up doing it, so he gave me this for the studio. It's kind of cool, though. There's some company that makes all the rivalry trophies. Fired up for today. Scott Dochterman is here from The Athletic. Of course, you can listen to him on Legends and Listeners with Chad Leistiko. We are presented, as always, by Steeple Ridge Bourbon. Doc, what's up, brother? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's good to be here. It's the first time I've been in your humble abode here, and I'm excited, to be in the Channel Seed Studios. And perfect timing. I decided to go to Ames this week for Cyhawk Week, and have some personal things in Des Moines. So
cool.
Perfect timing to come down and say hi.
Well, it's good to have you here. And we're going to talk about this game, but I think that the game, so you just went to Campbell's press conference. I'll pick your brain on all that. Ferentz goes on Wednesday, which I think is probably going to be even a little more interesting. Campbell's not going to say anything about injuries that we didn't already know. Caleb Bacon's out. Will McLaughlin out. Linebackers, huge concern for Iowa State. But this game is just weird to me, how it sets up this year compared to maybe other years. Like, so the Iowa defense is kind of like the staple, right? Like, you always can like rely on that. It's going to be good. But it's like the offenses for both of these teams that kind of have the hype going into this football game. And then see, I feel like we can get caught in that, but I'm also like, there's part of me that won't be surprised at all if this is just a really low possession game and we're sitting there in like the mid-teens come the fourth quarter on Saturday. What's your overall after week one? How do you size this thing up?
This series is always difficult for me to predict because you almost have to have, it's I don't say it's PTSD, but you have to remember what has happened in years where you expected one thing and it's something completely different happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to figure out, okay, what elements do I think are possible, can happen, and then what might not happen. And I look at week one. Iowa's first half was a continuation of all the bad plays we've seen for the last several years. Quarterback was inaccurate. Running game didn't get off the mat because the other team just slammed the box.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that can happen on Saturday if Caden McNamara is not accurate, if Iowa State, which has much better defenders than Illinois State did, is able to take advantage of those situations and force 3 and outs. And then, yes, we can get into that situation where it's in the third quarter and it's 10-10, it's 6-6, whatever, 13-10. And then you start to go, okay, this is possible for both teams, and it's also possible for Iowa State. I think the worst thing that could happen for Iowa State is for Iowa to get off to a good start.
Yeah.
Because I think that could really spill things over. But overall, when I look at the other part of it is, you mentioned the defense. Iowa's defense is the best unit on the field.
No doubt about that.
It's not even close.
Yep.
Number 2, and it's not even close, is Iowa State's offense.
Mm-hmm.
Because the explosive playmakers, I think one of the best young tight ends in the country, Ben Bramer,
Mm-hmm.
really good running back. And I think Rocco Becht really proved himself as being a very capable, solid quarterback last year. So I think if they're patient against Iowa's defense and play Ferentz ball if you need to, there's no sin in punting.
No, yeah.
If you can do the right things.
As long as it doesn't get blocked.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't get
Seen
blocked.
those.
Yeah. Or pick 6 to Sebastian Castro like last year. Things like that. That's why I look at this as then it comes down to the other side. And we saw Iowa's offense play really well in the second half, better than it has in a long time. And then we saw Iowa State's defense in that second quarter against North Dakota, which really surprised me. Just how
Me too.
they ran it on him over and over and over again. And you're like 12-minute drive, 22 plays or 23 plays or whatever it was. And to me, that was that's probably the most concerning. You can give up a big play and just say, hey, somebody just didn't see it right. But if you're getting churned to like that against an FCS team, you've got issues you've got to correct immediately, or this week you'll pay for it.
Well, and that's where I'm kind of landing, I think, is just it feels like a bad matchup right now with Iowa State's injuries, right? Like it's weird to say Iowa's offense is a bad matchup for anybody, but there was a drive where Iowa State played. I counted 7 linebackers in one drive the other day, and what that was after Caleb Bacon went out. Now we expect the freshman Brazina to get back, but he's still a freshman. Yeah. Still his first game ever playing at Kinnick Stadium, right? Like I'm not expecting this flawless type of performance, despite how talented the young man might be. They are so thin there. They're down 4 guys. Really, like either for the year or for substantial time. And I don't know if BYU or name a Big 12 school I'm staring at, but I just know Iowa so well. And it's like, even if, they can exploit that. They're one of the few teams on your schedule. I wouldn't want to play UCF this week. I would want to play Kansas State this week. And like Iowa will be comfortable just doing the old Mark Weissman 4 yards up the middle type thing against you. And I don't know if Iowa State can stop it against that size and physicality of a team right now.
Yeah. And you're looking at, the schematics of a 3-3-5 versus Iowa, what it likes to do running the football. And it has changed a little bit, but the tenets are still there. The principles, the way they block, the linemen. I mean, they went like 70% of their plays came from 2 tight end personnel. I mean, they just look a little different in the way they approach it. So what Iowa State will do, and has done is instead of going 3-3-5, they go 4-2-5, and they'll bring somebody up to the line of scrimmage. But if you don't have that linebacker who can, take advantage of it, still maintain your gap discipline in the running game, your run fits, all those types of things. And then you throw in Iowa's motion, which will get them to kind of chase ghosts a little bit. That could be really dangerous. And then you're ultimately faced with your safeties making a lot of plays, which Iowa State does have tremendous safeties.
And I wonder if the chess move isn't to sneak Bo Freeler up and really go with, I think this Cooper Evil 47 he's a dude. Yeah. Like he's going to be a really good player. He didn't tackle well in that first game, but it was really his first game. Like he had played special teams, but not like that. And I think that this Brazina, and then you bring Freeler up. And I just wonder if that's how you go with it if you're John Haycock.
Yeah, you're going to just have to, whether it's experiment or just do something to fortify against the run. Because if you're Iowa State, you're going to say, how can they beat us? It's through the run. Iowa played threw the ball really well the other day, especially in the second half. Cade McNamara was 13 of 14, and the only incompletion was a drop. He had 3 touchdowns. Luke Lachey will beat you. He's that good. But the rest of them, you just say, you know what, our guys are our guys. And we play in a conference where we have to face good wide receivers. Yeah. We'll be all right there. We'll survive. And if they beat us, they beat us. But you cannot let them beat you up front. And that means, prove it until they let them prove that they want to continue to run the football. Because otherwise, if you let them churn it out and you don't have your best players in the front 7, it could be a really devastating, because then you're talking about you're giving up 7 minutes and probably they're scoring touchdowns. And then if you go 3 and out and then they get it again, by the fourth quarter, you're wiped out. Yeah.
So from an Iowa standpoint, really fascinating to watch. So this first half happens and it's, Armageddon. Like it is, everybody's freaking out. Second half happens, and all of a sudden it's like, what did Andrew Downs said? He's been like bathed of the bad Iowa offenses. I don't know how he put it. It was much more eloquent than that. Usually the truth lies somewhere in the middle when it comes. It's same with the Iowa State defense, right? Like I probably have overreacted in my analysis to it, especially when you go into this game where we really don't know what to expect. And even when we think we do, we usually don't. Where on a scale of 1 to 10, like how real was that Iowa offensive performance in the second half as far as being able to replicate it down the next couple of weeks or so?
I'd have to go in the middle on this, like a 5. I think it builds confidence, and that's something that Iowa hasn't had on that side of the ball in a long, long time. And the fact that there were receivers making plays Reese Vanderzee, a true freshman, making plays. First true freshman ever to start, at least under Kirk Ferentz. That to me is it would start the opener, I should say. That's really impressive. I think the way Cade McNamara was accurate was impressive. I think also the blocking and the running when Caleb Johnson came into the game was also very solid. However, against a better defense, one that's not overmatched at the point of attack, some of those plays aren't going to happen. So I think in the first half, the first quarter was disaster. It was really bad.
Yeah.
Mid second quarter onward, they did show some rhythm and routine, but there were just mistakes. There was a big run called back because of an illegal motion. There was, a holding call. There was just something on every single one of those drives. And those are first game errors. Those are things that happen. But the first quarter was just bad. And so you saw that, okay, they're moving the ball. They're looking better. And then in the third quarter, they took away the mistakes and they're able to pound it. So I would probably give them, if 10 is, hey, they can do this against most teams, and 1 is they'll never do it again, I'd probably put it at about a 5, that they're going to be able to move the ball better than they have in the past. They've got a better team. They've got a better offensive line, but I'm not so sure that they're going to be able to do it this weekend with regularity or Minnesota with regularity. And certainly I don't know about Ohio State.
As you were saying that, I wonder if Iowa State ratchets up pressure too. I just wonder if they will go we're trusting our corners. We love our safeties. Like we're just going to go for it. And that's the way you do it on Saturday. Cause I don't know like that, but feels like, and it's a little anti John Haycock. He usually waits about at least a quarter, usually a half to do that. But I don't know. I don't know if you want to get down if you get down 2 scores to Iowa, it's all but over.
Right. It's going to create a lot of, and I'm sure it already has created a lot of schematic questions for the defense in particular. And, and the one thing I will come back to say is they only allowed 3 points, even with that long drive. They gave up 4 third downs. They 22 plays or, 12 minutes. They still only gave up a field goal and that was it. So it's fun to be in this position of nitpicking after a, positive result, but there's also concern when you're playing a better team like this. If you're John Haycock, again, I would try to crowd the box as best as you can, understand that they're going to break a few 10-yard runs. You just don't want it to be, what you got, what you see with Caleb Johnson from time to time. The other part is go after Cade McNamara. He shows an apt to not only throw off his back foot because of his knee injury. He still is not stepping and throwing with regularity.
Did that a lot in the first half in that game.
Always throwing off the back foot, which makes the ball sail or fall short. It doesn't have nearly as much zip as possible. So, you go after him there, and he's willing to take chances, which he did on that touchdown to Reese Vanderzee. But if both Freiler's there or if Jeremiah Cooper's there, that might be a pick. And so I would attack because you want to make him feel like he's got one option very quick, and you've got the defensive backs to shut it down if necessary. But you got to fortify the run defense. That's really job number 1.
Scott Dochterman in here with us, CW Pod. We are in the Channel Seed studio. Scott's going to take home this beautiful bottle of Iowa Everywhere Steeple Ridge Bourbon.
Nice.
At the very least, you can just put it on your little stand where you do your show with Chad at and all the other good stuff you're doing. The the game coming up on Saturday, again, I could see this being. Let me ask you this first. Ferentz coming back. There are all the jokes. I saw the one woman put a hilarious joke on Twitter about Mary Ferentz calling Seth Wallace at half. Okay, old man's asleep. You can start throwing now. It's like the best jokes are funny because there's like a hint of reality in them too.
Yeah.
I could see this game. I really could just being insanely low possession, right? Like I trust Rocco Beck to dink and dunk and take what's there more than I even did Brock Purdy back in the day, because Brock had that Brett Favre to him where he would just like lose it. How tempting will it be for Iowa to try and replicate that, even though the best game plan might be to take the 4 yards? And how much does Kirk Ferentz being back, does that even make a difference in your opinion?
I think it gives Iowa an emotional edge. And this is something that I thought when he announced he was suspended, that it gives them an emotional edge, not only against Illinois State, but Iowa State, because he's coming back, in which they didn't have before, because he's beloved by his players, absolutely beloved by his players. And I think that's shown over the years when you have the absolute worst offense in Big Ten history. For the last 40 years, no team has averaged fewer yards, and you can say the game has changed a lot in 40 years. And yet they didn't fall apart. They were all together. They won for each other. They didn't complain. They didn't complain to us. They didn't complain really internally either. I think the coaches may have been more upset about it sometimes than the players. So it shows what kind of faith they have for him. As far as game planning goes, he's fine with taking the 4 yards in a cloud of rubber filament, that pops up. Will Tim Lester be okay with that? I mean, will he want to take chances? Will Cade McNamara want to take chances? I think they're more than capable of saying, hey, if we can run for 4 yards a pop, we'll do it. But then will the quarterback and will the offensive coordinator respond to that? That's another question that we don't know the answer to, because Cade hasn't really, he was last year, he was limited before he got hurt for the season, and Tim Lester doesn't have a resume at Iowa to prove that. So now my question is, will Iowa State be willing to do that? Because is it throwing to Jalen Knoll out in the flat, and then Jamari Harris misses a tackle and they get 6-7 yards, and it's 2nd and 3, do it again, and then it's 1st and 10, and then do it again. Well, you only get 3 yards. Are they going to get impatient? Are they going to try to do something? And then next thing you know, the pass is knocked down. It's 3rd and 7. And then they try to go deep or whatever. Then they get sacked. And that's the danger for Iowa State. Just take what they give.
So, yeah, I could make an argument, I think. And I'm very much like, my listeners are tired of hearing about it. There have been so many of these Iowa State games where going in, you're not going to be able to run. And I understand keeping them honest, and I get it. I get all that. But like, it was the Texas game last year. You're going up against the best rush defense in the country. You can't run the ball against BYU. Not a great example, but point taken. Why? Like, throw it 50 times. Is there a possibility with the status of Iowa State's defense and linebackers, okay? And with the fact that I think that this Taylor Mauser is not shy about being a pass-first offense, is there a possibility that we see some real points and it goes the other way on Saturday because it just comes out of nowhere? Because I could make an argument that the only way Iowa State wins this game is if they go out and throw it 50 times.
Iowa State has to throw it 50 times.
But you're saying the different types of throws.
Yeah. But I'm also saying I wouldn't go down the field 50 times.
Yeah, no.
Because if you're 3 and out, I mean, the reality is, and this is the war games that they have to play, is that if they go 3 and out punt, Iowa takes it and goes 6 minutes, scores even a field goal, and then they come back out and they start launching it again, 3 and out, and Iowa
just beat down.
Then you're so depleted at the second level, and your guys up front are getting beat up pretty good by Iowa's offensive line, that in the 3rd and 4th quarter it's going to be over, and you're going to get beat. And instead of getting beat 13-6, you're getting beat 27-6 that way. I think the reality is possess the ball, and the possess the ball through the air is the way to go, because I do think you got to keep them honest and run the football, but it might only be in the 15 to 20 times range, which is keep them off balance. As on occasion, maybe it's 2nd and 7, you run the ball in 2nd and 7 instead of throw it. There's things that change the dynamic a little bit. I think that's what Iowa State has to do, because if you want to try to just run inside zone, then run a gap, and then it's going to be 3rd and 8, and then you're in a disadvantaged situation.
The final point on that I would make, and this is the number one thing I wanted to get from you today, is why you think Matt Campbell has struggled against Iowa. Because my analysis would be like, it feels like every year they just try and be Iowa in that game, where I've watched so many of these Iowa games in the past where Iowa State's not the better team. And they'll go on and they'll finish the season with 4 wins, but they beat Iowa because they've thrown something completely different at Iowa that makes Iowa uncomfortable, frankly. And I just wonder because of I think Matt Campbell is so much like Kirk Ferentz when it comes to his coaching philosophy, from the CEO stuff to how he views the game, complementary football, developmental program, name any of that stuff. Culture-wise, I think they're very similar within those walls.
Mm-hmm.
Matt's players will die for him, just like Kirk's would. I just wonder if this is the year with Iowa State's personnel, if you say, screw it, we're gonna zig when you're expecting us to zag. I don't why that's my analysis on it. Why do you think he struggled against Ferentz so much?
Well, I think trying to pick off a few of them that I think are irrelevant. Like the first one, Iowa was clearly better. They crushed him. Last year, I thought Iowa was better and won, and they weren't quite in the deep end yet offensively because they still had McNamara and Lachey. I thought Iowa was better. They held on. So I'd take kind of those two off and kind of start looking at the other ones. And in 19 was a fluke. They're even teams.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fluke. And because the ball bounces off a player who's or the two players running against each other. In 17,
that one is a regrettable one, I think, for Iowa State because the lightning delays.
Yeah.
Iowa State was really crushing them.
19. That was the.
Yes, the first college game day year.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, 19. Yeah.
And then the lightning delay happens, and I don't know what happened at that break, but Iowa recovered from that way better than Iowa State did. Iowa State was just dead after that.
Nate Stanley was a better quarterback than people think. I mean, he threw 68 career touchdowns at Iowa. He had a 5-touchdown game against Iowa State, and in a game that went back and forth. I mean, Iowa was up double digits, and Iowa State was, and Iowa came back, and in 17 and 18. Was that when Kyle Kemp was there and got hurt? And it was a real defensive struggle. It's like 13-3.
Yeah, and that was the year that Purdy came out against Oklahoma State a couple weeks later.
Right.
Yep.
Neither offense could do anything against the other defense. Iowa's offense was a lot of self-inflicted, but still was able to make the play that needed to be made. 2 years ago, I think the big matchup that everybody points to is the 21 game when they're both were in the top 10 at that point. And Iowa State did have the horses to win.
Mm-hmm.
And what I saw was Brock Purdy pressing too much.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there is that pressure. And I was, of all people, I talked to Brian Ferentz about that because Kirk was eaten up before that game. He was in the hotel. He was just like, kind of pacing and everything like that. And Brian said, he goes, if you're feeling like that, how do you think they feel right now? And that kind of calmed Kirk down a little bit. But that was when Iowa's defense took over and had 4 interceptions.
Purdy got benched in that game.
Yeah.
I want to say.
Yeah. Late in the game because he had 3 or 4 interceptions.
Yeah, he was just seeing ghosts everywhere.
Yeah. And Iowa's defense is vanilla in the way it does things. I mean, strategically, but it's so effective that if you're trying to press, and I think Purdy wanted to win so badly that it just caused him to make too many mistakes. And that's why I look at this game in particular for Rocco Becht, for Matt Campbell. Just have some patience. It's not going to go well for you for a while. That's okay. Just defensively, don't put yourself in a bad position. Play like Iowa, but attack like Iowa State.
This is why I would be such a terrible coach. I would go out there the first possession. I'd be 5 wide. And I know I'm wrong. Like I totally understand. I think this is a problem Iowa State fans have in general. It's very confusing because they used to beat Iowa all the time, but your team wasn't any good, right? Like you would win this game that means so much to you, but then you would go and just get your ass kicked in the Big 12. Now, like, you're very capable of beating Iowa. Like, these games are always down to the wire, but you've just fallen short. 7 of 8. You've fallen short. Even the game you won, like, God, like, they almost blew it at the end with that unsportsmanlike or whatever. Right? Oh, my God. I don't know if they would have let the team back in Ames if they would have lost due to that. Iowa State fans look back to when they beat Iowa in a different, you see where I'm saying it's very confusing, I think, if you're an Iowa State and probably for an Iowa fan too, right? Because that was when why do we play them? It's their Super Bowl. They get up for this game. And then it sucks for us because they always lose. It's amazing how it shifted the better Iowa State football has gotten, and now they can't seem to win this game.
I will say this, that Iowa football has gotten a lot better over the last 10 years than it did the previous
Great
6 or
point.
7.
Great point.
And when you look at where they were in 14 with That's Football, they were 7-6, which, they still got to a bowl game, but it just felt like this program was really stagnant, and it needed something different or another guy leading it. And they changed the tenor of the program. They got better. The other thing that I've noticed with Iowa is that they've embraced this series a little bit more. Kirk has, the players certainly have, that they've kind of lean into it now. They lean into the trophies. Before, they used to be just like trinkets, like all of them were that way. Now they're important to them. And I think the players have kind of responded well, but you look at from Gene's first win, in 7, and then, then probably 11. In 11, there were even teams. One was 6-6, one was 7-5.
That was the triple overtime.
Yeah. In 7, Iowa was better, but they were only 6-6, and they really lacked for talent for about a 5 or 6 year period there, other than 09 and 10. And so Iowa's gotten better as a program. Iowa State has gotten better too, and you can see where they respect them as equals or as potent teams. And I'm not. I don't want to diminish anything that they've done in the past because that'd purely be speculating, but I'm not so sure that they have the same approach that way in the past.
And who could blame them, though? I mean, if you look at how lopsided that rivalry had been, really the 5 years that McCarney had it, but other than that, it wasn't much of one. Who could blame Ferentz, this old school Hayden Fry guy, to not put a ton of emphasis on that? It's fascinating to me because I've seen both sides, and I remember the Iowa State puts too much emphasis on it. Why, and it's kind of, and Campbell, I don't think I truly don't. I know he wants to win. I was having a conversation with a coach the other day about this very topic, not necessarily Cyhawk, but the rivalry game, and like where the coach has this there's this dichotomy of like, of course we want to win it, but we're trying to win our other games too. And we can't just completely change what we do to the core for 1 week and then flip it and then do it again the rest of the way.
And that's what separates Matt Campbell from maybe some of the other coaches, Paul Rhodes or maybe even Dan, where there's so much emphasis and you could just feel that the Iowa game mattered so much that after that, it's like, okay, what's next? And then what's next it mattered, but it didn't matter as much. But now it's kind of the point where this game is important to both teams, but it's not the biggest game on the schedule. And that's what's really important for Matt Campbell to establish his program, that you look at last year, they lose to Ohio, but yet he gets his team to a bowl game. That was really impressive, especially considering what had happened to them in previous.
Yeah, who would have thought after that game that they would have won 7 games last year?
Exactly. Go to Kansas State and win, beat Oklahoma State, and play the way they did. That shows you the hallmark of a great coach, not just a good coach, a great coach, in my opinion. And I think Kirk has taken the perspective with this game, whether it's with Wisconsin or Minnesota, that these are important and fun games, lean into them. But as soon as the week's over with, it's gone. And move on to the next one, because you can't let this linger. Fans can. And I know around here, it's especially that case. I have a ton of friends who are Iowa and Iowa State fans in the Des Moines area. And the fact is, you live with each other, you talk to each other on a daily basis. So it kind of lingers, and where I live, it's a little different because it's one game and it's really important, but then it kind of moves on. But I saw firsthand what that does when you get 2 up for one game and then it crashes the next one. And that was, of all things, it was like 08. And it was Minnesota's Tim Brewster, and they were playing Wisconsin, and Wisconsin wasn't great. They weren't great, but they played, and it was like, we're going for the axe. Everything was about the axe. And they fell short by like 3 points, and they were just mentally defeated. And then they played Iowa the next week and got beat 55-0 because they had nothing left in the tank, and Iowa was rolling. And that's what you got to be prepared for, really concerned about as a coach is Iowa week is important for Iowa State. Iowa State week is important for Iowa, but then in Iowa State's week, you still got 9 games left of the Big 12. That's what's going to determine your season, whether it's a success. Now you can't, bug your family and your friends and your people at church and people at school and at work. But ultimately, if you're 9-3, you lost this game, but you're able to say, wait, we learned from this. We grew from this. We figured out what works, what doesn't work. And you go on and you have great success in the Big 12. That's ultimately bigger than just whether or not you carry that trophy off.
Well, the other difference between Campbell and a lot of these Iowa State eras before him is the team is genuinely better in November every year than it is in September, where those teams, Rhodes, most McCarney teams, Chiswick era is kind of weird. I kind of just glaze over that. But they didn't have a too deep.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they had really good starters. As long as their starters were in, they could genuinely compete with most teams, sans Texas, you know. But it was when, okay, you're knocking out that lineman there, and all right, you got a corner out for a few weeks, and then they were just depleted by the time they got to mid-October, and they couldn't compete in the Big 12. Well, Campbell has like a real program of there's depth, right? And not only that, but they're developing guys, and they genuinely get better. I think last year was a perfect example of that they, you know, look at Rocco Beck going into that Iowa game last year. We had no idea what he was.
Right.
You look at him going into this one, you know, based on all that development. So this is fun having you in here to bounce all this off of you, because this is usually like stuff that I have just swimming around in my head. And Iowa's interesting too, because how would you say over the Ferentz era, all 26 years, are they a better team in November?
Oh, it's not close.
Yeah, I was going to say that's it would be a no-brainer for me too. They've
only lost one game going back to 19.
Again, why these guys are so similar, I think.
It's because you want to play your best football at the end of the season. You want to build that way. And what you have Saturday is going to be a blueprint of what you may have in November, but ultimately it's not going to be the same. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be, somebody's going to get better. Somebody, a freshman receiver, an offensive lineman, they're going to get better. And you want to be at the point where you're playing your best football at the end of the season. That's why Kirk's so successful at it. That's why I believe Matt is too, because the hallmark to me of a very good to great coach is not, can you just build a program once? And he did. He built a program at least once with Brock Purdy, with Breece Hall. He inherited Lazard, but he had Butler and then Hutchinson and all those guys. But can you do it again when you're back to the bare bones? And he did. I think with Rocco Beck, with Higgins and Noel and Sama and some of the defensive guys. And if you can do that again, time after time after time at a place like Iowa State, which is doesn't have much tradition, but it's building it day by day with Matt Campbell, then I think that's really, to me, the impressive part of being a coach. And even if this isn't the year, maybe next year will be. It's just continuously building. And that's what I really like about how he's done this. He's done it the right way, developmental. He's fought in Iowa for Iowa kids. His predecessors never really did. It's like once Iowa got their teeth into him, they're like, all right, back off. Lazard was probably the only one that both teams really fought over, which
legacy guy too. Yeah, so it's kind of like,
yeah. I mean, Iowa was still just kind of knocking on that door saying, are you sure? Are you sure?
Yeah.
But overall, and then you look at just, how he's building the team, bringing in the right kids, and then developing them, getting them better. So year after year. Now everybody will say, well, they need to be better. Well, yeah, they do. But where they were 15, 14, 7, even the years they beat Iowa, they are so far away from that as a program. It's not even close.
I even thought to myself doing post game on Saturday that they had just, 21-3.
Yeah.
And you never felt like they were there was never a threat that they were going to lose. And you had these fans just carrying on. And it's like, well, I mean, if anything, it's a compliment. Like what Matt's whole deal was raise the standard. And he most certainly did.
Yeah.
And then there's also just that thing as a coach where, I mean, Iowa fans have seen this so much. And I think Iowa State fans if you haven't gotten used to this by now, you should be, where once they feel like they've won the game, like that's the objective with these coaches, win the game. They're not style point guys. They're not. And I think Iowa State was probably looking at that going, man, we've gotten so many injuries already. Like, I'm not going to screw around with this. Let's just get out of this thing as much as possible, which Iowa fans are completely used to over 26 years.
Yeah. And it can be frustrating for fans when, it's 21-3 or it's, 28-3, whatever the score will be in the fourth quarter. And even if the second team's in there, you just want to punch it. You want to get more points. You want to, beat on your chest a little bit more. It's 35-3. Not
the
20.
Russell Crowe, are you not entertained thing?
Yeah, exactly. But no, they just take the air out of the ball. Let's just get this thing over with and move on. And it certainly made sense for Iowa State the other day. I mean, they have a lot that they needed to work on. They knew that. They didn't want to get any more injuries. They showed what they're capable of on that first drive. 2 plays, boom, down the field. Very explosive. They showed other times when they were very capable. I think Rocco missed a lot of passes that he would like to have.
Yeah, the
back.
first quarter, I think. Yeah. I mean, if he hits 2 of those 3 overthrows, I mean, it's you may have scored 40.
Exactly.
How that game changes.
So those are things you just show on film and say, next time, where to go, or next time, throw the ball this way and you're fine. And so, I've seen enough of Iowa's first game where it's just blah. You just like, ugh.
It's horrible.
And you're just like, oh man, this is just,
the tailgate's the main event for the fans.
Yeah, exactly. It's like going out and chugging a warm beer.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, this is nothing. But then the next week they're much better. And Kirk is the best coach I've ever seen when it comes to adversity. He comes back, bounces back better than anybody else because they keep the same mindset. They don't change anything, and the players have all bought in. And I think Matt's in the same boat because you wouldn't be able to survive what they've done the last couple of years. I think last year, losing to Iowa, losing at Ohio, having that fan kind of go after him. And
on top of the gambling thing.
Yeah, the gambling thing. They were destroyed by gambling more so than Iowa was.
Mm-hmm.
And yet just put your blinders on, go to work, fix it, and make it better, and have players buy in and get better and improve the whole way, not just forget this place, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's really the hallmark of what he's going to do. So whether or not they win, I mean, I'm leaning towards picking Iowa, but let's say Iowa wins 20-10. You say, okay, that sucks. We lost. They won the trophy. Tomorrow, everybody start getting your rest. We're going to come back to practice on Monday. We're going to start figuring out a few things.
That'll win the Big 12.
Yep. Go win the Big 12.
Which is not a crazy thing to say.
No, not with 86% of your production back, not with a quarterback who threw for 3,000 yards last year, not with those 2 NFL wide receivers, not with one of the best tight ends in the country at his age, and with a pretty good running back, couple of good running backs. So.
Last thing for me, did Iowa, I don't know if you do like your internal power ratings or how that works. Did they jump for you after week 1? Was that enough for you to go? Because I know you're high on them. Like I've heard you talk about the playoff and all that stuff. What did that do enough for you to increase those expectations?
Nudge it a little bit.
Okay.
Just a little bit, because I still look at Ohio State's the best team. I think Penn State's probably number 2. And Oregon, to me, was very disappointing, but they had a stinker in week 1. Let's see what they come back with. And they play Oregon State next week, which I'm thrilled that they're playing. Michigan took a little bit of a step back for me, even though it was 30-10, but it was 23-10 when Fresno State was driving to score another touchdown, and then it took a pick 6 the other way. I thought USC was probably the team that has impressed me the most in the Big Ten.
No doubt. They're playing defense.
Yes.
I haven't seen a Lincoln Riley team play defense like that.
If they play like that all year, then there will be some issues. I mean, they play Michigan on the 14th. And that could be a real interesting matchup just based on that. So Iowa, I've kind of got them at number 4 in the Big Ten right now, and they looked a little bit better. I want to see, they may not score 40 points, but I want to see a better performance this week, like they're growing. And if they can show that, then I think I'll be much more willing to kind of push the chips in the middle of the table.
Last one is Nebraska. They get Colorado this week, which is probably more flash around that game than substance, but I kind of like Nebraska. I kind of like them in the offseason with all their production back. I just know Rule well enough where he just seemed like the perfect hire for them at the time after the Frost debacle. They needed a guy with substance, just somebody who was just a substance type of dude. And Rule could have probably, you'd know better than me, but if Jim Harbaugh leaves at that time, he would have been a guy who could have gotten hired for a job like that, right? Like this is a guy who is a top end dude, rookie quarterback, but man, that win total of 7.5 over, I think after I watched their game last night just quickly, but that quarterback looks like the real deal. He's going to take some lumps. Do you have a thought on them?
Yeah, they're really good. I think they are now, they're the type of team that's going to go from 5 to 9 wins. And their schedule helps out.
No doubt.
You know, they play Iowa, Wisconsin, USC, and Ohio State. But if they can win one out of those 4 probably and be like 9-3 and win the rest. Maybe they have to be careful because in the past they've lost to a Purdue or an Illinois or somebody like that. That's kind of cost them. But I think Dylan Raiola may be the difference maker that they've been looking for all these years. And their defense was really good last year. Their offense was almost as bad as Iowa's. It just didn't get the attention because they weren't going to a bowl game and they weren't Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what is fascinating from talking to the ADs at the different schools, you could kind of tell that what they are looking for at Nebraska, at Minnesota when they hired Fleck, and maybe a little bit even in Ames is somebody that could be like Kirk, build a program, develop our players, turn them out the right way on and off the field, that sort of thing. And I think Nebraska has finally bought into that, which before it was just like, we're Nebraska.
Yeah.
And strut themselves around like, wait, we should just collect 4 stars and be better than you walking on the field. And it just, they're not playing the Iowa State of the 80s or the K-State of before Snyder or Kansas anymore. They're playing other teams that don't care about that history and have no recollection of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you look at Iowa and what they do to Nebraska, and it's like, that's the way we need to play. If we have a little bit more offense, we could beat Iowa. But until we play line of scrimmage football that way, we'll never get there. But I do think that they are finally in a position to where they can compete for the upper third of the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think so too. And they got money and they have boosters and all that stuff means more than ever. Scott, get out of here. I know you got a busy week just like I do. We appreciate you coming in. Love your show with Chad. You guys are doing a great job. Love reading your work. Athletics is my go-to spot now. It's the only place really I go for national sports. So tell everybody there we love what y'all are doing.
I most definitely will, and thanks for having me on, Chris.
He is Scott Dochterman, Legends and Listeners with Chad Leistico. You can hear them coming up later this week. Aiden Wyatt producing. We will be back with CW Pod next week. Murph and Andy coming up tomorrow at 1.